Okay, I need to hit my little got it. Yay. And get back on my screen. Well, good morning, everyone. This is number 3 in our STEP classes. STEP stands for Science That Explains People, and they're mental health info sessions for helping professionals. Now, this were prepared for the Polk County Health Services, especially for the Children's Mental Health Services. And there are 4 virtual sessions on the Zoom platform, and today's is session 3, all from 10 a.m. to 11:30 in the morning, and all presented by me, Karen Williams. Hello. Now, we're examining following 4 topics. We've already talked about in the first session, development, how the human brain works and develops. Then we covered behavior, how our survival instincts and temperaments affect our behavior. Now we're going to look at adolescence. And this is a multiply by 10, the special developmental challenges and risks for teens. And then the last one, that's number 4, would be distress and trauma, mental health management, interventions for daily life and different temperaments. And basically that just means 60 ways to calm ourselves down when we are naked and alone. Now we have a 60 more that if you need a dog or a person or whatever, but if you're naked and alone, you can do one of these 60. So let's get started. When adults know how the human brain works and develops and how different children's and teens' brains are, we can protect everyone better. Now remember, session 3, and it's generally called adolescence. However, we almost have new information about adolescence. But first, a brief review. We're going to use some new slides mixed with some of the slides from sessions 1 and 2. So if you haven't been to a session before, you're not lost. And you can get the handout from sessions 1 and 2 and add it to the handout for session 3, and you'll have everything we've covered. All right, then we're going to take a look at the differences in the chain brain, and it's going to blow your mind. Now, this is my favorite slide, and it's from Louis Cozolino, my favorite, author. Overall, stress, anxiety, and fear are all enemies of learning. They impair cortical processing, problem solving, and the underlying biochemistry of neuroplasticity. Now, if you've been to our sessions, you know exactly what that means. It just means distress places cognitive and neural development on hold, quite literally, just freezes them where they are. And Harvard calls this toxic stress. And it's toxic stress because our chemistry has become so, our biochemistry, a chemistry we make inside our own bodies have become so toxic, they're actually harming us rather than helping us. Now, there are some key terms that we had before. To mitigate. To mitigate is to buffer or reduce the effect of an impact of something negative. So a buffer is to reduce the effect. And basically, unmitigated means that nothing has buffered or reduced the negative effect or impact. It's kind of like a bulletproof vest. A bulletproof vest mitigates and buffers the negative effects or the impacts of a bullet on its target. Now, look, you may still go to the hospital and they may miss the vest and hit you anyway, but if they hit the vest, you're still going to have bruises, sometimes cracked ribs. You're going to get hit. You're going to feel bad, but you're not going to die in most cases if they hit the vest. It mitigates and buffers those negative impacts and effects of a bullet on its target. Well, look. Stress is to stimulate. Now, we need stimulation in our lives. Some stimulation is essential to life, and failure to stimulate an infant can result in failure to thrive, which means delayed development, if at all, and sometimes death. So stress is essential. Stress is just stimulation, but distress is to over or understimulate. Now, boredom is understimulation, but trauma is an extreme level of distress or overstimulation beyond your ability to cope with it. Okay, now that is a very hopeful statement. For if a person has adult support and can develop protective distress management habits, because we can make all sorts of habits that aren't very protective. In other words, we get a mitigating vest, okay? And the vest is greater or stronger than their automatic distress reflexes, the things that happen to us automatically. These habits and adult support act like a bulletproof vest to mitigate and buffer the negative effects or impacts of trauma. So you may not be able to take the source of trauma away. In most cases, we can't. I mean, it's either already happened or it continues to happen without our being able to intervene on it. But we can make it possible for them to live under the distress and still thrive, still go ahead and do well. That's what resilience is. Now, look, neuroscience, that's what I study, has made us re-examine unmitigated distress in all its forms and think about it and talk about it very differently. Unmitigated distress interferes with learning and brain development. And the most important learning and brain development takes place from birth to age 25 or 30 for some people. The earlier unmitigated distress happens, so earlier you go without that flak vest on and you live in life, the more undermining and damaging it is. So let's think about this. The alarm has gone off. Teens are far more sensitive to distress than any other population. Look at this. Because youth are all about building their brains, you can multiply what you know about how stress affects the adult brain by tenfold when you think about a 10 to 20-year-old's brain. 10 to like 2 through 19 or 220 is the teenage years. Because youth are all about building their brains, you can multiply what you know about how stress affects the adult brain. Now we know how it affects the adult brain by tenfold when you think about a 10 to 20-year-old's brain. So teens are far more sensitive to stress. And the teen years are all about making sure their vests are in place, those mitigating habits, those habits we can build in those children that make, and the adult support. In many cases, a teenager is just treated like a young adult. They're as big as a house, they're bigger than we are. They're eating us out of house and home. How could they be a child? But if we do not equip them, they will be at the greatest risk, tenfold greater risk than an adult. So knowing this makes a difference. Now, this is how I teach mental health. I teach health. Health happens when our body is at ease and our mind is in order. And as I've explained in the last 2 sessions, the reason I use these terms is this. We have physical and mental health, okay? Physical, we can measure lots of different ways. If we have tests like, cholesterol tests and all that, but most of the time we don't take the test first. We just look at body composition. How much bone and fat and muscle do we have? We look at our coordination. Do we have balance and flexibility? We look at strength. That's our muscle power. And stamina. That's our endurance. And for mental, that's psychological, we look at cognitive. In other words, not just executive functions, but how do we manage thinking and, self-directed things, and emotion, that's our feelings, behavioral, our actions and reactions, and social interactions with others. That's our psychological, that's our mental health. Now, the reason I chose what I did to explain health is this. We can have a physical illness. That's a temporary minor disruption to our body's ease. Or we can have a dis-ease, lingering significant disruption to our body's ease. So a dis-ease is a disease. Now, for mental, we can have a temporary illness. It's a temporary minor disruption to a mind's order. Grief is that. Grief is just overwhelming. It's sometimes traumatizing, but it's designed to be an illness. You need to get over it at some point. Now, a disorder is a lingering significant disruption to our mind's order. And that's when you've gotten an orderly mind that is out of order for a long period of time. And that is a disorder. Now remember, dis means not, or the opposite of what it precedes. So if your body is supposed to be at ease and it's not, for a short period of time, you can call it an illness. For a long period, it becomes a disease. Now, it's lingering and significant mental disorder makes a difference. This is simple. If you teach it this way, people are not afraid of mental illness because it means you've got a cold in your mental system, okay? If you don't take care of it, it could become pneumonia. It could kill you. But it's nothing, mental illness is nothing to have a stigma. It's just like you got a cold. Don't ignore it. Don't add to the damage. So look, their healthcare professionals have a handbook called the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's what DSM stands for. And it's the 5th edition, so it's -5. About 12 years between -4 and -5. And by the time they published -5, they were 12 years behind the science, but we've got the book. So look, it's used for diagnosing symptoms that can show whether or not our emotions, attitudes, thoughts, thinking, and behavior have become disorderly or disordered. And look, we all know fight, flight, and freeze is automatic. That's our automatic responses to anything distressful. We have a fight, flight, freeze. And it can literally knock us off the beam. And when it is, we are disordered. Now, we can fall off the beam and get right back on, then we have an emotional illness. But it didn't devastate us, didn't knock us down. That's traumatized. But you don't have to be traumatized for long. You can get back up very quickly. But some people can't. They need much more help. Now, look, remember the book, Preventing Mental, Emotional, and Behavioral Disorders Among Young People, published in 2009. I hope you got those short 6-page summaries of this because it's just mind-blowing. Now, if you take it and you use the DSM-5, and that explains what was found in preventing mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. You put those two together, and they tell you that children and youth are most at risk for the following mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. Now, these are the affective mental, emotional disorders. They call those affective. Anxiety disorders, depression and mood disorders. And I have to tell you, science now has proven that anxiety disorders always precede depression and mood disorders. They go undiagnosed. Kids don't tell you about their anxiety, their fears, and whatever else until they're in depression. Because what happens is the chemistry in their body under anxiety disorders, we are messing with our chemistry so much that it literally helps us create depressive and mood disorders. So these are listed in order. And then post-traumatic stress disorder means you just have not gotten past it. The disorder, the post-traumatic situation, the adversity that you went through is over, but you can't get past it. So, and under age 14, it's called child traumatic stress. So post-traumatic stress disorder is for over 14. Child traumatic stress is for under 14. Okay. And these are the behavioral health disorders that children and youth are most at risk for. Okay. Conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. And I have to tell you that oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder, we didn't have those. In the first version of the DSM, there were only 12 disorders. So they had meet every year, a group of psychologists, psychiatrists, and counselors and so forth. And people send in the kinds of symptoms they're seeing that they can't match to the book. And then you can have a new disorder identified, but it depends. The reason it's called statistical manual, you have to have enough people reporting the same symptoms to actually put it in the book. Yeah, okay. But we didn't have conduct and oppositional. Our young people were showing us we are so unable to handle life that we are acting out. We are oppositional. All right, now there's obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorders, substance use disorders, and self-harm disorders. That's the order, okay? Now those are the behavioral disorders that our children are most at risk for. Obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorder, substance use, and self-harm disorders. Got it? Okay. That means you've been knocked off the beam, knocked off the seesaw. You're traumatized and nobody's helping you get back up. Nobody's giving you the protective vest. You just whack the fire out of yourself. Now, this same National Research Council report showed that most mental, emotional, behavioral health disorders have their roots in childhood and adolescence when the brain is still building and developing. Look, 75% of mental emotional disorders in the US begin prior to age 24 and 50% begin prior to age 14. Untamed, unmanaged, unmitigated, whatever you want to call it, survival reflexes, it's your fight, flight, and freeze, are just linked to clusters of preventable mental, emotional, and behavioral health problems and disorders. Look, you don't tame them, you don't mitigate them, you're not wearing a vest, whatever. These clusters are going to cause mental health problems and disorders. Now, when survival reflexes, that's your fight, flight, and freeze, which are automatic, are ignored or punished, they can escalate into a disorder. If you don't do anything about them, in other words, well, you got it. You understand. You just ignore them or you punish them. They're going to get worse. And as they get worse, they're going to escalate into a disorder. Now, the wonderful news is symptoms show up 2 to 4 years before reaching the criteria for a disorder. Yeah. So we have time to prevent the disorder. Not maybe the emotional fray that they're going through, not maybe the emotional illness, the cold that they have, but we have time to prevent the pneumonia, the disorder of the mind. Now remember, survival reflex behaviors, that's our fight, flight, and freeze, are in response to something distressful, and they're automatic. We have to be able to be on the bench, on the beam, and helping offset that. And how quickly we can do it is how resilient we are. Now, sometimes healthcare professionals may prescribe a patient an outside chemical, a medication, to aid him in taming, managing, and mitigating the effects of the survival reflexes, because you got to do something or they're going to get out of hand. And these are generally medications for pain, anxiety, or depression. And they're called psychoactive or psychotropic medications because They help tame and manage our survival reflexes and ease our physical and psychological discomfort. They put us back on the beam and get us in the right corner to balance things. But look, when the doctor writes you that prescription for these medications, they should also refer you to somebody who can work with you about your skills and habits and somebody who can support you to build your resilience. Because if you don't have the resilience, you're not going to actually be able to get yourself back up on the beam without the medication. And the more you're able to help yourself back up on the beam, the less medication you're going to have to take. So it's a real investment for the doctor to build the skills and habits and the resilience you need to help prevent you falling off the beam in the first time. Now, look, mental health is more than just the absence of an illness and disorder. Being mentally healthy during childhood means reaching the developmental emotional milestones and learning healthy social emotional skills and how to cope when there are problems. In other words, learning to be resilient. That's your whole job. Now, mental disorders among children are described as serious changes in the way children typically learn, behave, or handle their emotions, which causes distress and problems getting through the day. And mental health depends on managing distress. And children have to have enormous help with that. And if the adults in their lives are not managing distress, guess what? They're learning by watching those adults. Now, many children occasionally experience fears and worries or display disruptive behaviors. That's just a norm of childhood. But if these symptoms are serious and persistent and interfere with school, home, or play activities, the child may be diagnosed with a mental disorder. Well, you know what are indicators of children's mental health? Let's just read them. The ability to show affection and friendship, resilience, healthy coping, okay, getting back up on the beam when you're knocked off, or just sitting on it and resting for a while before you feel like you're off. Positivity and hope, curiosity and motivation, persistence and hardiness, and self-control regulation. If they're lacking any of those, they're more vulnerable to mental health issues. So remember our model? Well, we're going to see it again because I want to be sure everybody's got it. Model is a balance beam. Okay, now life is like being in the middle of a seesaw that's mounted just precariously on a large ball, meaning that the seesaw is shifting unexpectedly all the time. That's just life. It just tosses us about. And it is super sensitive to any adjustments we may make. So every time we move in a direction, that beam has to move in an alternative one. Now, our only job is to learn how to keep our balance so that we can do everything else in life. But, if we're not balanced there, we're not going to be able to do much of anything. The problem is that we can learn, develop, and have mental health only when we're in balance. So staying in balance is terribly important. It's also known as homeostasis. Now, you could actually describe it this way. Life is like a moving mobile, okay? A balance beam, in other words. Stay on the beam. It's our job, our only job is to learn how to mount and dismount that beam safely and how to perform on the beam. That's what they want us to do, perform. To do this, we must learn how to stay on the beam. And that's not easy. We're not in charge of the beam. Life is. And we don't come into the world knowing anything about the beam, our job, or the consequences of not staying on the beam. That's what life is. You get taught little by little and the hard way. Now, we know relatively little at birth. And experience teaches us and develops us. Now, when life throws us a curveball, notice that little curveball heading for his head, we can be overwhelmed. Lose our balance, be knocked off life's seesaw, and be flat on back on the ground. We are mentally, emotionally, and sometimes socially overwhelmed. And guess what? Being overwhelmed is the definition of psychological trauma. Yes, and nothing is more of a curveball than what happens to us during the teen years. Now, psychological trauma is defined as a level of mental, emotional, or social distress that exceeds and overwhelms one's coping skills and habits. Let's call it again. Psychological trauma is defined as a level of mental, emotional, or social distress, okay, that exceeds and overwhelms one's coping skills and habits. Now, psychological trauma exists within the person, not in the event or circumstance. You have an adversity in life. If you cannot deal with it, it can cause psychological trauma. Now, we all respond differently to anything challenging or threatening. In other words, to any adversity at all. And the same situation can be mildly inconvenient to one person and absolutely devastating to another. We see that in parental divorce during the teen years. Some teenagers go, well, finally, they're getting away from each other. God bless them. And others that are just completely devastated. And some people need far more support than others to overcome and recover. And we're sometimes not prepared for that. Now, look, Experience and stimulation, that's what experience is. It is stimulation, shapes our neural architecture. When we talk about neural architecture, we're talking our neurons networks, okay? That's the networks. Now look, we arrive with all our neurons. We have 100 billion in our brain and trillions in our body. We're looking at the brain right now. We have 100 billion in the newborn brain, 100 billion at 1 month, 100 billion at 6 months, and 100 billion at 2 years. We're not getting any more neurons. You're just networking them. You're stretching them and stimulating them and causing them to make friends with the next neuron and the next neuron and the next neuron, and they're making a network. Now, we arrive with all of them. Let's say we arrive with our 100 billion in our brain, but only 25% have been pre-wired or networked. Yeah, only 25%. Just think about what a newborn baby can do. We've said for the last 2 weeks, leak, squeak, eat, sleep, and poop. That's it. That's all that's their entire repertoire. The other 75% of our neurons are waiting for life to provide the experiences to network us, and experiences that wire and connect our neurons into networks. That's what develops us. That is development. So if we're doing anything that's messing with the network of our neurons, we are messing with our own development. Oh, that's serious. All right, so there are 2 periods of massive and very different developmental vulnerability. Birth to 10 years, that's when we build our foundations and basics, and adolescence, 10 through 25 or 30. Now, teens is 10 to 20, and 220 means through 19. So 10 to through 19 or 10 to 20. And adolescence is longer now because we realize the brain isn't fully developed. I mean, it's not basic. You're building a basic brain. That's all you're doing. Building a basic brain takes you about 25 years to do that. Some people up to 30. And that is known as adolescence now, not across the world. Not everybody's gotten the word, but just be prepared. Adolescence at 10 through 25 or 30, and the teen period, which is encompassed in that, is the preparation for adulthood, and quite literally a second chance. It encompasses late elementary and middle school. And guess what? If you haven't been able to get anything in elementary, you've gone through without your foundations and basics, guess what? You can do it, especially in middle school. Middle school is made for catching up what you missed in the elementary years. Now, you don't catch it all up, but you could get ready for adulthood during that period if you just had someone who would assess that you're behind and teach you differently than they taught you in childhood, because you're learning differently. So it's prep for adulthood and a second chance at anything. Look at the special programs developed for middle school. They're amazing. Now, there are different stages that are preset by DNA for different purposes. Stage 1 is in the womb. You got 9 months of development there. Stage 2 is birth to 6, about those ages, sometimes younger, sometimes older. So that's stage 2. And stage 3 is from 12 to 18, and sometimes from 10 to 19 through 19. And then there's 24 through 30. And that's some people, it takes that long to build a basic brain because they've been fighting it all the time. Now, this is preparing for the PFC reset. PFC stands for something. Stands for the prefrontal cortex. That's where the arrow is pointing. Lay your hand across your forehead as if you had a fever. Okay. So, just put your little hand right there. Okay. And that is your prefrontal cortex. Now, you first 12 years of your life are preparing for that PFC reset. And here's what it is. The prefrontal cortex is in charge of self-directed thought, self-directed movement as well, but self-directed thought, self-parenting, executive function, self-control, self-restraint, all the things you want people to have. But what happens during teenage years is they seem to take a step backwards. And that's the truth. They do take a step backwards because guess what? The prefrontal cortex is resetting itself for the teenage years. You don't have the same child you had before. I mean, people say, what happened to my child? Who took them? Well, guess what? They're being rewired for partnerships. They're being rewired for the teenage years. They're being rewired to put all their energies into the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex does some stuff of its own. It's just amazing. So we're going to talk about the prefrontal cortex for a little bit. Now, first 12 years of life, an opportunity to wire, neural pathways for resilience. That's all you got to do. You build a kid that's resilient in the first 12 years, and they will get through the rest of their life, no matter what's forced on them. They will have the means and support to make it. Now, it's an opportunity to wire those neural pathways. You're wiring into networks. You're wiring resilience. You're wiring attachment, trust, self-worth, belonging, self-soothing, self-control, self-regulation, values and basic emotional knowledge, and relationship skills. That's what the first 12 years are about. And then the reset happens. And you get the opportunity to wire new neural pathways for a new kind of trust, a new kind of attachment, new executive functions, complex relationships, and practicing independence and maturity. You're getting rewired so that you can have partners in life, partners, business partners, community partners. And you need experience in all of that in order to build it. You can't build those networks without some experience. And if we are not helping our children build these, they're going to go from adolescence into young adulthood without them and won't be able to teach their children, and will just perpetuate having teenagers that are 65 years old, 14, 15-year-old, 45, 55, 60-year-olds. We have them all over the place. We have them by the time you're 45 years old, you look like a teenager. I mean, that's what the police absolutely hate, is taking a 14-year-old home and finding another 14-year-old on the porch disguised as a 38 or 48-year-old man or woman who goes wacko, rolls in the dirt with them, and everybody gets arrested. It's insane, but we do not realize the importance of this period. Now, first build a resilient child, and what if we didn't? Well, we got middle school, we can help the resilience there. And then in high school, a new kind of trust, a new kind of attachment, new executive functions. But this means that our brain it's resetting, and it's having to use energy differently than we're prepared to work with. Okay, that's enough on that one. So let's talk about teens. All right. Now we're going to focus on the teen brain, ages 10 to 20. Okay. Now, the teen period includes preteens, and it's from age 10 through 19 up to age 20. And adolescence, which includes the teen years, is now from age 10 to 25 or 30. Now, when the research came out that your basic brain wasn't even built to about age 25, we realized that some people are late bloomers, and it took up to 30 for them to do it. That's when adolescence took on a different shift. We call it young adult period, but it's really adolescence because they're still building the basic parts of the brain. Your hips and spine do not build into permanency until around age 24. That's why you don't take a kid under 24 into professional football. And the brain is housed in a cage called the skull, and it doesn't mature until around age 20, 21. It still has those fissures, those sutures, and you can really be very damaged because the brain is housed in this nice little chamber, but that chamber is not finished until around age 21, 22, 23. Really interesting how the things overlap. Okay, now the teen brain is being remodeled, and it works differently. I want you to know it works completely differently. In fact, the teen years are among the most important periods in all of brain development. The latest science shows that there are 75 major differences in the teen brain when compared with the adult brain. Yeah. But we can't compare the teens to adults because teens' brains and the rest of their bodies operate so differently. And those differences cause the risks to be different too. And teens are more sensitive to and more affected by distress. In other words, we're actually harming our children in many cases. Those that are the most sensitive get hurt the most. And that doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to happen. Now, across the developed world, teens are more at risk for the following: traffic deaths, you can understand why, mental health problems, and addiction than all other populations. Traffic deaths, mental health problems, and addiction than all populations. Not only are teens' brains being remodeled, they are more sensitive to distress, but often adults add to that distress rather than trying to mitigate it or buffer it. You want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about. Yeah, there's times when our behavior actually triggers more trauma than life put them through. Now, preparation for adulthood. That's the overarching goal of the teen years, is to prepare for adulthood. Not only is the teen body making profound changes, the teen brain is too. Teens are supposed to be developing and practicing self-parenting skills, how well they can self-parent. And let me tell you, they're going to parent the way you parent, then you may not want them to parent that way. So look at how you're parenting, because you're modeling self-parenting as well as parenting in the future. They're supposed to develop and practice self-parenting skills, independent thought and independent action, which means you have to teach them these things. They're not going to just learn them on their own. Some people have marvelous models to watch, and sometimes those models aren't in their home. They're in neighbors' homes or somewhere. Look, pushing, this is what they do automatically. Automatically, they push away from their parents. They're curious and seek novelty. They question and bend the rules. They test everything, especially oneself, and they see how much exploration and risk they can tolerate. And they seek their power and purpose and form new partnerships. If we're not allowing them to build their power, know their purpose, and build partnerships, then they're going to be in trouble. Now, if a teen has no one to teach them about power, purpose, and partnerships, gangs and terrorists will. That's why they, go around the herd. They circle the herd looking for the weak ones. Nobody's teaching you anything about power. I can give you ultimate power. I can put a gun in your hand. I can teach you how to take you. Am I on some kind of repeat there?
No, Karen, I think we let somebody in, but they're muted now.
Okay, good. Okay, just wanted to be sure. All right, now if a teen has no one to teach them about power and purpose and partnership, which is the purpose of the teenage years, gangs and terrorists will, because gangs give you ultimate power. It didn't say it was good. I didn't give you a purpose. I didn't say it was a good purpose. And partnerships, they'll partner with you. They'll knife you in the back and when you turn around, but that's where you're learning your power, purpose, and partnerships are gangs or terrorists. They look for the people who are longing for that with no adult to teach them that. And the teen years are a double whammy. There's a massive brain reset. The thinking part of the teen brain gets ready to be remodeled, okay? So that new experiences can rewire the brain for adulthood. Then comes puberty. It's plus puberty. That brain reset plus puberty. Reproductive hormones create new emotional sensitivity to everything. Look, you're growing hair in parts of your body you've never had hair before. Your voice is changing. Girls are getting breasts and periods, and boys are forming tents under the sheets in the morning. It's nothing. You can't trust your body for nothing. It's falling apart on you. And then 50% of youth, the brain reset and puberty happen at the same time. We used to confuse these. We go, well, it's puberty. They lose their mind when there's puberty. Well, puberty is physical, darling. And the thing that happens in their thing is the brain reset. Sometimes 50% of it happens at the same time. Yeah, it's puberty and the brain reset. But for the other half, we just didn't figure that out. Okay. Now we do know. These are two separate things. Teens are making their move toward adulthood, out of their little imprisonment of childhood. And teens' number one job is to survive with a changing brain, a changing body, and a changing reality. That's a lot on their plate. And just being a teen can overwhelm and traumatize some youth. The amount of distress that's teenage years can literally create a mental health condition. Now, when you add all the pressure from parents and school and society, it's enough to push some teens' attitudes and behavior over the edge along with their futures. Because they simply have no place to become, and they have no instruction and how to get that way and no models for it. Now, adults' number one job is to teach teens how to manage and mitigate their distress responses, how to mitigate and reduce their negative impacts and effects. If I get upset and I do not know what to do, neither does my teacher in school, neither does my counselor in school, neither does my, where do I go? If you ever wonder why everything just goes a bit blinky during the teen years, science now has the answers. The teen brain is actually brilliant and challenged and bored and exhausted all at the same time. But first, the teen brain is just a whole lot developmentally different. You need to know how different it is. Networking during the birth to 10 years, much of it's just scaffolding. That's all it is. You're just building a scaffold. You're putting something up so that it's going to be taken down. Scaffolding is temporary networks that are built, and they're needed in early development and during childhood, but these are not meant to be permanent. So during the teen years, they're removed, they're pruned. That's what they're called, pruned. During the preteen and teen years, DNA removes and prunes the networks that were part of the scaffolding of childhood. They're intended to be removed. And the DNA removes and prunes the networks that were not stimulated enough, in other words, didn't enough blood, oxygen, and energy to thrive. You didn't feed them often enough. They're starved. No sense in keeping those kids at the table that aren't contributing. So they're out of here. And then it's called use them or lose them, baby. And finally, after the pruning, DNA opens up new sections of neurons which have been reserved from birth to be networked by new experiences and prep for adulthood. Now, if you don't use those, you lose them too. Okay, experience networks, DNA prunes. Experience networks, DNA prunes. That's a neuron, little brain tree. Yeah. Okay. Well, we have 100 billion in brain and trillions in our body. 25% of them are built at birth. Those networks, and then network and wire, network and wire. And then prune and remove. The weakest ones, the temporary networks, the scaffolding. Okay. That's how it works. It makes the brain so much more efficient. And think about this. If I've got to build what I built in childhood, again during adolescence, my forehead, my prefrontal cortex is going to be, well, I have my own shade. I've got my own, I don't need a baseball cap to put a bill over my eyes. I've got my brain sticking out there, but I'm taking those down, those scaffolding coming down, those non-used ones are coming down, and it makes room for the new. But that pruning has a purpose. It makes room for the new networks to be, the new neurons to be opened up, and those networks formed. Now, when the pruning begins in the teen years, this is a mad scientist is taking hold of your teen's brain and behavior. They are just lunatics, and so are we. And then he leaves, taking part of the teen brain with him. And let me tell you something, that is so true. Here's what happens. This is network density at birth, age 6 and age 14. Compare birth to age 6 to age 14. And let's read the thing on the left. One major example of pruning is during the teens, when childhood's concrete thinking is removed so abstract thinking can be built and developed. Yeah, there's a period at 14, that's average for everybody. Some starting at 10, others going down to 16 or 17. But this is an average, 14, where you have less networks than a 6-year-old. Yeah, things have been taken out. Have you had a chance to build them? No, that's going to take another 10 years. Well, is that not just, all right, just compare the 14-year-old and the 6-year-old. Look, at the height of pruning, teens are starting over. They're learning to think differently. DNA has done the first stage of remodeling, it's removed it, creating a gap. And teens have less thinking ability than a 6-year-old for at least 6 months, 18 months, and sometimes up to 2 years. How long does that period of lunacy last? For some people, 6 months. For some people, 2 years. You have less thinking ability, and you've got to build these things at the time that they're ready for them, because the window does close at some point. Now, the part of pruning that targets the prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex is our place where we have our self-directed attention, focus, concentration, thinking, problem solving, decision-making, judgment, and self-control. Those are our executive functions. Those are our self-parenting functions. Those are our self-control functions. Okay, that is where in childhood, the pre-EFC, not in childhood, the PFC learns to connect past experience with present action. Very important. Listen and pay attention. Now, some of them do. Follow multiple instructions. Do errands and chores efficiently. Filter distractions. Delay gratification. Well, let's say you had a perfect kid, and so you taught them all these things, and that by the time they were 12-year-olds, that's what they were able to do. Wow, I've got the perfect kid. I don't have to mess with anything. They have been. I think I've lost my connection with my filter distraction, delay gratification. I've got the perfect child. Now, if you've done all of this, the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, is ready to be rebuilt in the teens for new uses in adulthood. But your child doesn't have these things anymore. All right, think about this. You can teach a 9-year-old, you can teach a 4-year-old to sweep the floor. It won't be done well, but you can teach a 9-year-old to sweep the floor. You just say, honey, get the broom and sweep the floor. They sweep the floor, they pick it up, put it in the trash sack. You tell them, take the trash out, they'll do that. Wow, well trained, okay? You said that broom to a 14, you say, honey, get the broom to a 14-year-old. And they go, what? Okay, get the broom and sweep the floor. Or just get the broom. Come in here and bring the broom. Bring the broom to me. Okay, they can bring it. They look at, but they've got it now. They don't know what to do with it. And they can't. All right, go in the corner, sweep toward the middle, put it all in, pick it up with the dustpan, put it in the sack, and take it outside. What was that first part? Oh, it drives me insane. What is wrong with you? Yeah, they can't listen and pay attention. Take them shopping for school supplies. All you need is one more box of pencils. You're in the checkout line waiting. You can see the pencils from the checkout line. You send your 14-year-old to get them. They have to walk 15 feet, pick it up and walk back, and they disappear. You've now let 17 people in front of you in the line, and that child is still not back. And when that child arrives, they arrive bright-eyed and bushy-tailed saying, hi, Mom. And they go, hi, honey, where's the pencils? What pencils? Oh, well, the one box I have is pre-sharpened. I'm going to stab you with them because it makes us crazy. But that's gone. Now, these have been pruned You have been robbed. Pruned. They're gone, 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 gone. You've been robbed. Now think about this. Adults and teens are now responsible for teaching the adult, learning the adolescent. All of this all over again, but differently, including explanations of why, when, and how. They don't follow instructions anymore. Okay. They need a why, when, and how, and a model. You go, well, I've already done that during childhood. Guess what? You're going to have to do it all over again. And if they're driving, they're going to have to get home safely. Look, you can teach this with sports, but you can teach it better with driving. And about only a third of our nation kids get taught driving. But that's what you got. If you want them to connect past experience with present action, you have to explain it. Listen to teach it, to teach them how to listen and pay attention again. Follow multiple instructions, filter distractions, delay gratification. All that has to be taught once again, but not from the point of view, this is what you do. This is why you do it, how you do it, and practice it with me. Because I'm trying to teach you to parent yourself first and then to be prepared to be a parent of somebody else. And all the executive function you use for driving, you use for self-parenting, and parenting others, and working in an office and whatever else. If you have a great coach, they can teach that on the football field, the basketball court, baseball. You can use sports to teach life, but very few do. They teach them to win. We've got all the equipment. We know all the stuff. But our expectations are completely out of hand. Now, this is the peak of the PFC, the prefrontal cortex pruning. Starts at 10, goes to 19. So let's look at it. It's built on a bell curve. Now, a bell curve means that the ends sort of match each other, okay? A bell curve is just, if I had my statistics in bars and I lined my statistical bars up, they would be lined up, and then I draw a pencil line across them and they'd look like a bell. That's how a bell curve got its name. So these are our statistical bars all lined up like a bell curve. We have 3% and 3%, 10 and 19, okay? 5, 5, 7.5, 7.5, 10, 10, 15, 15, and 25% right in the middle. That means 25% of our teens reach the peak of PFC pruning, brain death. I mean, I'm sorry, I love teenagers, but it's like, oh my God, they just were the most frustrating and all at 14 and 15. That's the majority, 14 and 15. Now, if you have 15, 15 on either side and add that, that's 30, that's 55%. That's 55% of our teenagers do the peak of pruning between ages 13 and 16. Yep, 13 and 16. That's just going to drive you out of your mind. That's where they need more support than they've ever had before in their lives. Even toddlers do not need as much support as teenagers do, because toddlers are not prepared to do the harm that teenagers do to themselves and others. So the peak, that does not mean someone's not doing it out at 17, 18, and 19. And by the way, the pruning, affects the myelin sheath and all that happens. And you have kids from 17 to 19, particularly male, that are pruning late, actually have a greater risk for schizophrenia, because that's all connected. Look, most girls do it earlier than boys, and most boys do it later than girls. But, this is the general peak of pruning. So you can take a look at your children's ages and go, oh, now, if you're not, some people did it at 10, worry about them too. Now, a 15-year-old brain scan study was conducted for persons ages 5 to 20 by the National Institutes of Health and UCLA. It was published in 2004. This is how we got most of this information. And they're doing another one right now. It's called the ABCD study, Adolescent Brain Development, Cognitive Development Study, Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study by UCLA. No, it's University of California at San Diego is doing it. And they're doing 12,000 kids. And so you can look up that information. They're going to have tons and tons and tons. They used all the questions from this 15-year brain scan study of persons 5 to 20 to base the new study on. But okay. Now, in this study published in 2004, okay, scientists and doctors made brain scans with magnetic resonance imaging scanner, which does not use any radiation, okay? And that's the reason there weren't any studies of the young brain in the first place. You didn't have the MRI. Now, that's your prefrontal cortex right up here in front. And they scanned only the cortex. That's the wrinkled outer layer from 5 to 20. So it's a wrinkled part plus the PFC. And no, children under 5 were excluded, not included, because they couldn't stay still throughout the scan, which lasts 45 minutes. Well, the new brain scan study takes kids from infancy up. And guess what? There's now a program that compensates for the movement of the child's head, and you get a good scan. So, okay, they scanned the cortex, and here's what they found. Now, oh yeah, here's the new study, ABCD. So it's in your handout, 9 to 20. Okay, so now here's the 2004 study. Group composite MRI scans of brain development from ages 5 to 20. There's a side view and a top view matched. Okay, matched. And I have put the grades up here simply because they're easier to understand because we're all familiar with them. So look, side view, top view, and we've got matched. Okay, now there's the teen driver. Okay, and look at how much the brain's not developed. Scientists and doctors met with twins. Right? They did twins in this study so they could rule out anything genetic. Over a period of 15 years, scanning their brains multiple times each year as they developed. They used colors to identify the changes. Red was the least developed. Now, look, remember, there is nothing out here under 5 years. So if I had side and top view of under 5 years, it'd be out here on the left-hand side, and it would be mostly red because that's the least developed. Yellow and green are early development. Dark blue is halfway developed, and bright lavender means the basics are wired. Now look, in college, are all the basics wired? No, it's not all purple. Bright lavender, there's not all bright lavender. There's a bunch that isn't. In fact, if the top one up there, there's a little bit of red for all of them. So that's what's developed by age 20. It blew our mind. A major finding, it takes a minimum of 25 years to build a basic brain. You work on it for your entire life, or it falls apart on you, one of the two. Okay. But in the first 25 years, you only get a basic brain. Brain development is not complete at age 25. The teen brain is about halfway there when the thinking part starts over. Remember, so this is the top of the cortex. Okay. There's your cortex developing. They scan the top. Now, if you put your hand out, you'll figure out what part they're looking at. Just lay your hand out and you go, well, that's the P. And your fingertips are, where your fingers are, that's the prefrontal cortex. Okay, top of the cortex, and that's the prefrontal cortex. Now, they scan both sides. Okay. They scan the left side and the right side, but I'm just showing you the left side. Okay. And it's the PFC right in front, your fist and thumb tucked, and in the bottom of the cortex. Okay. I flipped it over, and you can just flip your hand over. That's the palm. To make the PFC, I just tuck my thumb in my fingers. Got it? That's a model. Flat hand, turned hand, the PFC on the side. All right, we got it. The bottom, the underside is the most protected. Now, look at the bottom of that cortex, the most protected side. And how much is dark purple? Oh, not any, hardly at all. Right in the middle of the dead center was a little bit. Now, from the top of the brain, it appears that everything's going along in the right direction for the prefrontal cortex. There's a little box called on the prefrontal cortex going from 5 years old to preteen to teen to 20 years old. Hey, it's moving, it's maturating, it's moving in the right direction, more mature. The purple's the more mature. However, note the red, our least developed, still evident at age 20. Look, okay, can you see it? Right there. Right there. Now, look at the underside of the cortex at 5 and 20. PFC, we know where it's located. Okay, it's the top, the bottom of the cortex, age 5, bottom of the cortex, age 20. Yellow and green are early development. Dark blue is halfway. Bright lavender, the basics are wired. And there's not much bright lavender. At age 20, you get a little bit right in the center. And red is the least developed. Now, you know what that red area is? Judgment. Yeah, judgment. When it comes to judgment at age 20, the brain is still least and early development because the purpose of adolescence is to be taught how judgment is formed, how you can form your judgments, how to evaluate your judgments. Yeah. So they got judgment. And they have trouble with cause and effect because they're putting the pieces together again. They are starting over. And this doesn't build without guided experience, coaching, and support. Now, you could use teaching them to drive. You could use any kind of mechanic where you have a partnership, team sports, playing in a band, marching band. Marching band teaches more about the guided experience and coaching you need, oh, right there. We've got it all. We're just not using it. And teen brains are on overdrive so they can complete all their new development on schedule. They are racing. The teen brains new information. Teen brains learn new information at 50 to 80 times faster than adults. But they got to be interested in it. If they aren't interested in it, they'll never learn it. But when they're interested, they can learn it 50 to 80 times faster than the adult. I mean, they are consuming energy like crazy. That's why they eat us out of house and home. They're trying to replace all the energy that they are burning. Now, adults are so much slower than teens. That's why teens doubt us. They think we are stuck in concrete, and pretty much in comparison, we are. Technology, that's why they love it. They consume energy at about 50 to 80 times faster than adults too. Yum, yum, yum. Now, when this pruning and opening of new neural territory and this racing brain begins, teens become more like tall toddlers. And this race can land for 6 to 12 months, sometimes 2 years, sometimes 3. Now, teens and toddlers display very similar behaviors. That's because the same part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, is under distress. Now, look, your peak between birth and 6 years is 2 to 3 years. Your peak during 12 to 18 is 14 to 15. We know the peak of pruning for the teen brain is at the same place. So let's look. There's my little precious 2 to 3 year old, and the PFC opens. It opens around 2 to 3. That's the terrible toddlers. Okay, you know why? Because it's like rebellious, willful, self-centered, have mood swings and can't delay gratification. No, me, mine, I do it. Let me know. Okay, they're so adorable, aren't they adorable? And here's a little bevy of teens. That's when the PFC is pruned. Now, I've just opened it during the toddler years, but it's being pruned and reduced to much less during the teen years. Guess what? This bevy of teens is rebellious, willful, self-centered, have mood swings, and can't delay gratification. Oh, do they look alike? Yeah, they do, except for age. And our little toddler, need for sleep. Can't sleep. You have to run them around town, whatever. Appetite. They eat nothing or eat you out of a house and home. Look for the dog and cat. Eye rolling. Oh my God. 3-year-old girls. Oh, impulsive and whiny. Well, guess what? Need for sleep. Can't wake them up. Can't get them to sleep. Appetite. They'll eat a 25-pound lasagna. Put 2 boys in a room with a 25-pound lasagna. Leave them alone and come back 20 minutes later. The pan, that 25-pound lasagna, has gone somewhere. It's disappeared. They have an orange ring around the mouth, and they are hanging on the refrigerator door going, what's for dinner? And they're serious. Eye rolling. Oh, it's not just eye rolling. It's every part of their body. Their body is just moving all over the place. I used to put my hands over my eyes with my teenage daughter and go, honey, I can't watch. Everything's loose. Let's wait and talk about this later because I just can't deal with it. She would just be so furious at me. She uses it on kids now. I'm sorry. That's just passed on. Eye rolling, impulsive, and whiny. I don't, you never let me, everybody else get. Yeah, you got it. Now, impatient? Well, yeah. If I'm 3 years old, I have 3 years left until I'm going to be on my own all day with strangers in school. Or if you're putting me in preschool, I'll be there 3 or 4. Okay. So I'm very impatient. And look, I'm impatient not only if I'm 15, I only have 3 years until I have to be on my own legally and responsible for all my own actions, not just left alone to make decisions among a school, but legal and responsible. So they're impatient. Look, the little ones are just starting out. They're just learning to control their body and behavior. And the older ones are starting over, learning to control urges and surges and everything else that's going on. And that's why we storm. That's why we literally cannot be in each other's presence. Look, toddlers have a racing brain. Teenagers have a racing brain. Toddlers learn through exploration. Teenagers they learn from exploration. We're just afraid they're going to explore each other. And then they're brainless. Now we can accept the fact that toddlers are brainless, okay? But they're brainless again. And that just is unfair to everyone. And then comes hormones, and then we leave them alone. And if the McDonald's manager is not teaching them anything, they're not going to learn anything. And 2/3 of teens are sleep deprived. Okay, most students need more sleep. 6 out of 10 middle schoolers don't get enough sleep. 7 out of 10 high schoolers don't get enough sleep. And kids 6 to 12 need 9 to 12 hours. And teenagers 13 to 18 need 8 to 10 hours. look, teen circadian rhythms return to toddlerhood. Yes, they return to toddlerhood. So they can't do with less than what they need. And the vast majority of teens are sleep deprived. And just like toddlers, they need 8 to 10 hours to develop. And the body's automatic wake up is 3 to 5 hours later for teens than adults. The body's automatic wake up is 3 to 5 hours later for teens than adults. Waking a teen at 7 a.m. is like waking an adult at 4 a.m. And there's a bunch of teenagers that like to watch that happen and see what the adult would do. Now, I don't mean starting school later or anything like that. You have to teach them how to deal with it. But the first period of class should be more about really about them only. They'll pay attention to that. And drowsy driving is as dangerous as impaired driving. So remember, their wake up call, which makes them not so drowsy, happens 3 to 5 hours later for adults. If they're driving other kids to school, you might want to think about that. And the evening sleepy delivery, that's your melatonin delivery for teens, is 3 to 5 hours later than it is for adults. That means if the average adult gets sleepy around 10 p.m., the average teen gets sleepy at 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. Yeah. Remember, a lack of sleep creates distress that interferes with development and can cause the starvation response, the hangries. So when teens have a chance, let them sleep. And if they don't have the chance, then teach them how to manage themselves staying awake when they don't feel like staying awake. That's part of the adult teaching that we have to do for them. Now, their breathing practice is getting sleep, and breathing practice is to stay awake. So if you taught them those, that would be one. And how long does it take for a habit to form? 254 days. So you're going to have to do it with them. Remind them probably 254 times. Now, when teens are upset or distressed, they have a distorted feedback system. Their feedback system does not work like ours. They have a super sensitive to others' body language. They watch your shoulders for little tips. They don't even know they're doing it. And teens see a concerned face and an angry face. And teachers need to know this because I used to say to Edward, if you don't pass this test, you're going to fail. He went home and told mother, I was snarling, I was spitting, I looked harmful. And I don't remember any of that. I just remember being upset, but I didn't say, this is my concerned face. Now, I have an angry face if you'd like to see it, but this is not it. So they need to know the difference. And teens are super sensitive to others' voice intonations. Have you ever had a teen say to you, stop yelling at me? And other people were around you. They said, you never yelled. Your voice never quavered. I mean, it was not got any louder at all. But they heard it. Look, it's not, everything's magnified to them. Life has turned the volume up. And they cannot seem to manage it because they do not know how to deal with those sensations. They've all been altered. Now, most teens are distressed from exhaustion, just pure de-exhaustion. There's all that pruning going on without their permission at a time that they don't get to pick, and we don't either. So there's tons of pruning in the prefrontal cortex, which everybody's going to rely on because I taught you this before. You should have it. Don't tell me it's been pruned. Well, it has. And opening of new neural territory reserved to be wired only in the teen years. And if they're not helping me learn it, then I'm going to go out of the teen years with these unwired areas of my brain. And a racing brain. I have to understand that my body and my mind are racing. And I need to know how to calm them down because I'm going to have one that for quite a while. And puberty, that comes in addition to all the rest of this. Puberty is driving everybody else mad and me mad too. And then lack of sleep, which only adds to more distress. And when distressed, they're 2 to 5 times more cortisol is released and it stays 2 to 5 times longer. Remember, cortisol is our distress chemical. It's our steroid. And so depending on how your temperament is, it's from 2 to 5 times more than the adult. And it stays 2 to 5 times longer. So you can't calm down without strategies to calm them. That's not good for the brain, not good for your parents, not good for school, not good for society. And behavior, look, since being calm is the only behavior that gets us anywhere, it keeps us on the beam. To behave is to be calm. We must teach and learn how to behave or to be calm in every situation. And behavior, all behavior has a purpose. Behavior is an observable outside sign of what is going on the inside of an individual. So tell me, which of these children is calm? Which baby is calm? Well, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out because how did we know? We assessed his or her behavior. We looked at the child on the left and looked on the child on the right and said, that one looks like calm. But we have automatic fight, flight, and freeze behaviors. These are survival reflexes in response to a perceived threat. It doesn't have to be a real threat. We just have to perceive it as threatening. And some of us are far more sensitive and we think things are threatening when nobody else does. They're our alarm system, and they are a scream for help. If we see them as anything else, then we're not able to help that child. And that child is going to go through adolescence and get in trouble and worse trouble. So look, we have fight, scream for helps. Physical, hitting, biting, spitting, that is a scream for help. Verbal, cursing, yelling, hateful words, scream for help. Bullying, threats, controlling, manipulative, passive aggressive, all of those. They're all under the fight, but they're all an automatic behavior. And they literally are our scream for help. And there's flight. It's not always running away or truant, although it is. Sometimes it's clowning. You can't get me to be serious because I'm scared of being serious. Or the moment you make any pressure on me, I'm going to daydream. I'm smile at you, be perfect in class, do everything I'm told. I've got a play going on in my head. Are people who freeze, they stuff it down, they hide, they faint, they literally can't deal with it. And that's the ones most at risk for self-harm. Look, it's all based on fear. All of these are about fear. Frustration, discomfort, distress, anxiety, trauma, and you respond with anger, rage, aggression, helplessness, and hopelessness. And those are the pleadings that are saying, help me now. Well, we do this for the kids who are freezers because they look like they need our help. But the fight and flight, we're on them. We don't see that as a scream for help. We see the ones for freeze, but not the others. Nature's immediate response is automatic. And what offsets this immediate response must be learned. We're not going to learn these without somebody to teach us. And practice, practice, practice. But that's not all. Temperament. Teens have temperament. They get it at birth. Temperament describes a child's or a person's personal style. In other words, the way he or she experiences the world. It's different from personality. And it's actually part of our pre-wired 25% at birth, along with our fight, flight, and freeze. Now, generally, there are 5 characteristics that describe one's temperament. And if you all are interested, you can find it, a whole big article. There are lots of books on temperament. None of them agree. They're all, theories. But the one that makes the most sense and is easiest to understand and learn are the one is called on 0 to 3, birth to 3. And it's called 0 to 3 and it's temperament. And I think it's at the end of this slide. Let's see if it is. All right, activity level. Think back when your teenager was a toddler. Activity level, active or not active? Sociability, cautious around others, very shy or outgoing. Frustration tolerance, easily frustrated, more tolerant of frustrating situations. First time they tried to tie a shoe and they threw the shoe across the room, not very tolerant. Emotional intensity, reactivity, quiet and less reactive, more noisy and very reactive, or coping with change, disturbed most by any change or very tolerant of change. So think about how they were before. And, that's not there, but it should be 0 to 3 temperament. If you put that in your search engine, 0 to 3 temperament, it's a great discussion of all of these, all of them. Okay, but the way I think about it, temperament determines how much we perceive something to be bothersome, uncomfortable, painful, or threatening, and how much we react to it. Now, each of us is pre-wired with our own sensitivity to stress, pain, and trauma. And, what does this picture do? For some people, they laughing at it. Others, you cannot bear to watch it. Others have grabbed their cheek. Oh, my God. All of us respond differently. We're all sensitive in a different way. And, I've done this chart. This is temperament, pre-wired sensitivity to stress. Now, and everything's blank except that top area, okay? Same situation, there are different automatic survival reflexes. We know those to be fight, flight, and freeze. Across the top are our temperaments. Mellow in the green, sensitive in the yellow, highly sensitive in the orange, hypersensitive in the red. Now, explain it this way. If Mr. Mellow, and I'm going to call him Mr. Mellow because I was in hypersensitive and I married Mr. Mellow. Didn't understand the sucker and the thing, but he taught me everything I know. It's amazing. His parents taught him things like reframe and tame. They taught him that. Who gets parents like that? Anyway, Mr. Mellow is in the green almost all the time. Now, if he were a fighter, he would only show you concern and frustration. When he is rageful, he shows concern and frustration. Drives me nuts. I'm going to say this is missensitive because under the sensitive area, there are 60% female and 40% male. So I'm going to say Miss Sensitive gets worried and worry. She just worries herself about what's going on until she gets absolutely worried. There's highly sensitive. They're in the orange. They're anxious and snarky. I love these people. You know where they are at all times. And hypersensitive. Oh, me. Angry, hateful, and hurtful. Know where all your buttons are, and I delight in pushing them because you make me nervous. I'm going to make you nervous. I didn't realize that was harming me until I married Mr. Mellow. Now, all right, so let's move on. If Mr. Mello were a person who ran, the flight people, okay, he would simply ride it out. He doesn't run, or he runs toward. These are our firefighters and nurses and meds and medics, and so we have some in all of those. But these are the ones that are the calmest people inside. When anything goes wrong, you want them in charge. They're the medical doctor who looks at your wound, doesn't react at all, just sews it up. You know, they run toward the problem or they ride it out. Miss Sensitive daydreams. The moment you start to put pressure on her, she's got a daydream ready. Highly sensitive is absent, just leaves the scene, does not want to stay, or is sent out. And when I mean sent out, I used the example last time of a child hates reading, cannot read in public. I mean, it makes them sick at their stomach. They have headaches from it. I can't do it. The teacher has said to one of these children, Daniel, you're going to read in 20 minutes. Please prepare yourself, because teacher's being sensitive. Okay, well, Daniel takes care of it, punches the kid next to him, and he's dismissed from the class because he was sent out of the classroom. He feels like he's victorious. I didn't have to read. Now, he doesn't realize he's got a reputation. He's hurt himself in the long term. He just wanted out of there. He got out. And, hypersensitive, right in front of you is going to run away, which we talk to childcare operators, and they'll go, there's a child who just runs. I mean, he runs right out of the classroom. He just gets out, cannot deal with anything. It gets a little bit, worrisome to that child, and they just take off. Yep, that's me. Okay. If Mr. Meller were a person who froze, just absolutely, he'd be quiet and pensive. That's all he does. Miss Sensitive gets hesitating, halting. Listen, she knows the answer to every question on that test. Practice it endlessly. But you ask her in public, you ask her in a class, she's going to hesitate and halt, not even be able to tell her name. Highly sensitive is hunkering and hiding, can hide out at school all day. Hypersensitive, shut down and self-harm, most likely to self-harm. Now, when anthropologists look at this, they break it into categories. They go, look, there's about 30% each for mellow, sensitive, and highly sensitive, and 10% of our population for hypersensitive. That makes your 100%. And that 10% of hypersensitive were actually designed to be warrior class. Okay, when did I mute? Somewhere there, I just got a sign that I was muted, that the host had muted me. So did we get to shut
Sorry,
down?
Karen, that was me. You were talking about the warrior class.
The warrior class. Okay. Now, we don't have a warrior class anymore. People sign up to be in our warrior, to be the warrior class, and you get people from all sorts of things. But this is how anthropologists look at it. They look at it as that 10%. Well, that 10% now is in juvenile justice settings. So we'll just tell you, I should be in jail and am not, because I married Mr. Mello, and I had an enormous help from adoptive mother she didn't adopt me at all. She was a friend of a girlfriend. And she literally saved my life because she saw that my temperament was such, and I'm highly hypersensitive. And people wouldn't call me hypersensitive. They say I'm the meanest old bitch they've ever met in their life. She's just shut her lip and staple it too. But that's because everything bothers me so much. And I married Mr. Mello because opposites attract, and that was a total opposite. And I realized that he worked differently than I did. And I was killing myself being hypersensitive. But it took so long. We took a married life to teach me to calm down. So temperament is important. It's terribly important. Let me click on this again. And whenever you're hungry, you have fatigue, or you're upset at all, it just cranks it up. So whatever your temperament is, it gets worse when you're hungry or fatigued or anytime you're upset. I mean, mellow can get to be like sensitive, and sensitive can be highly sensitive. Highly sensitive could be hypersensitive. Where does hypersensitive go? There's no place to go for hypersensitive. Oh yeah, to harmful. Yeah. And that's what happens to us if we do not teach our kids in those first 12 years of their life ways to manage themselves. When they get to be teenagers, it's so much harder to get them through that period. And how much of a reaction? Look, we have different automatic reactions, fight, flight, and freeze, but we end up being, because of our temperament, how we react. Now, let's say we've set this hammer to hit each thumb exactly the same. Mr. Mello hollers and puts the hammer down. Sensitive drops the hammer, begins to cry. Highly sensitive curses, tosses the hammer away. Hypersensitive uses every curse word in the book, just every curse word, and then makes some up and then beats the hammer until it's like smashed into 1,000 pieces and throws it across the room. Ah! Actually, that feels good. So, which one's the hardest to calm down? Duh. And which one needs the most help? Which one's going to be the least likely to get it? You know, it's not hard. Now, the intensity and duration of teens cortisol, the chemical that's released when they're distressed, which prompts fight, flight, and freeze, is the fuel for fight, flight, and freeze. During the teen years, distress adds more cortisol and it lasts longer in duration. Now, their chemistry just works differently. Their chemistry works differently, darlings. Mr. Mello gets 2 times the amount of cortisol an adult does. As a teenager, and it can't calm down to lasts 2 times longer. Is sensitive gets 3 times and it stays 3 times longer. Highly sensitive gets 4 times and 4 times longer. And look, I didn't need any at all, but I get 5 times the amount and it stays 5 times longer as a teenager. And if you don't teach me how, I'm going to take that into adulthood. How to calm down is the most important thing. Anything challenging, distressing, or threatening just increases cortisol, so it gets worse and worse and worse. Now, which columns are more likely to be more sensitive when others are impatient or say hurry? Be more sensitive to normal challenges and to any adversity, to use the most energy and waste the most energy, to be hungry or starving more often, sleep less well, show agitation quicker or longer, or require longer and more intensive instruction and practice to build calming habits. Well, surprise, surprise. We know this. We see it when they're toddlers and we send them out of the room or we spank them or we do whatever else, but we don't teach them anything. And which columns are more likely to, have a lack of trust in others or any kind of system, feel unsafe both psychologically and physically, have the least control or choice in their lives, feel the least connected to society? Well, they already feel that way. What if they're growing up in a violent home? Just wiring them and rewiring them. And which columns are more likely to be suspended, be expelled, be in the juvenile justice system, use psychoactive drugs and meds, or cause themselves physical harm? Well, we know. So we need to identify these children, and they identify themselves early on and teach them how to manage those feelings. And they're harder to teach and take more time and more patience. But we can prevent mental health problems from developing into mental health disorders if we just give them a little help, like starting every classroom period with a breathing practice or a yoga practice or something. Look, all of us have different triggers that set off our automatic alarms, our distress alarms, and bring on when our needs are not met. Kids need their needs met. And any look or sound or gesture, words, touches, and smells can cause kids. It includes hunger, fatigue, thirst, boredom, feeling unimportant, ignored or put down, that we don't belong, afraid we won't know the answer, someone will make fun of us, insecure, and any form of physical or psychological discomfort or pain, or anything that reminds us of a past trauma. All of those are triggers. Have we taught our kids the triggers? And remember, our sensation. I'm going to put this thing at the top up here, push it up, get rid of it, do something with it. I've got this little bar again. Okay. Our sensations and emotions are both called feelings. And that's not a service to us. We need to look, when our teenagers say, I feel so in love, what they're feeling is sensations. We're 85% physical senses and sensations. Faster heart rate, breathing quicker, body temperature, muscles flipping, stomach flipping. Oh my God, when he touches me, I'm just so in love. No, you're in heat, okay? 85% physical. And then you name the mental emotion, okay? That's what you do. These are always first, and that second, we name the emotion. You get the same kind of feelings with elation and, orgasms that we do for being upset. But we name them differently because they're for a different purpose. But we always, if we'll calm our physical sensations first, we'll be able to calm our emotions. and we'll be able to manage them. Everything begins with our body. Now, remember the importance of being calm. When you're upset and you want to be all set, you have to reset. You have to balance yourself on that beam. You have to look trust and self-worth and motivation because you've got fight, flight, and freeze automatically. Those are our automatic alarms. And calm is synonymous with balance and homeostasis, and how quickly and reliably we can restore and maintain a state of calm is synonymous with resilience. How quickly we can get back to calm is how resilient we are. And because survival is pre-wired to always be number one, fight, flight, and freeze are always there. So for the most of our life, we have to find calm on our own. And when we're calm, we can think about our other needs. Do we need water? Are we hungry? Are we tired? Do we feel safe? The longer we're calm, the more blood, oxygen, and energy is sent to our gut and is more making dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. We can't lose. That's what rescues us. Now I've got a few words to say about adult words. We should be providing needs. All their needs should be met, but that's not going to happen in this world. So prevent the escalation of distress. There are always consequences. Children need to know there's always going to be a consequence, but do the comfort and control C's first. Don't start with the consequences. Start with courtesy. You go, why should I be courteous this little? You know what? Not courteous to me. Are you modeling? Are they modeling? Okay, courtesy, model compassion, model comfort, feed them and water them, calm them. And cause and effect. You need to ask what's causing you to act this way. Don't expect an answer. They don't know. They got one answer. Oh no. I don't know. No, they don't. That's telling you the truth. And consequence worked out in partnership, which allows power sharing. Okay, get it? You're teaching them how to manage themselves, manage other kids. Adults are always modeling. Don't forget, everything you do is a model. You're teaching the process and behaviors that youth will repeat. If they're acting really crazy, then you're showing them how. And show patience. Prevent distress. Patience says breathe. I know you can do this, but something's blocking you. We just need to find out what it is. You're not trying hard enough. Take a breath. Let's try another way. Keep breathing. I appreciate your trying. Meet their needs. Prevent distress. The 2 questions to avoid. What's wrong with you? Oh, good. God, if I had only known that. I didn't know what's wrong with you hurts a child to their heart. This escalates the helplessness and hopelessness that triggered the negative behavior in the first place. There's nothing wrong with them. They're trying to tell you, I need something. I don't know what it is, and you should know. And what were you thinking? Well, duh. Remember, they have less thinking ability than a 6-year-old. Instead, ask, do you know what's causing your reaction? And if they don't know, teach them. Don't expect an answer. Help them figure it out. How can I help? Who else could help with? You could ask a lot of questions. Now, teens are at greater risk for mental, emotional, and behavioral problems disorders than all other populations. When teens untamed and unmanaged survival reflexes take charge and overwhelm them, literally traumatize them, teens are at the highest risk for a disorder. They're going to be thrown off the beam and laid flat on their back. They're going to be traumatized and they won't be able to know how to get up. Now, when everything's in jeopardy and we're just in survival mode, does that look like a safe place to be? Without hope or relief in sight and without skills to manage our distress and response, and nobody's there backing us up. I mean, it only takes the smallest push to just topple everything. And sometimes we just get way in too deep. Everything's falling down on us. We don't know what to do. And sometimes we just can't run fast enough. And I love this graphic. Every day turns into a dogfight. And all of their energy is sucked. And when that happens, life just sucks. The teen years are about building maturity and preparing for the launch into adulthood. And what we have to do is make sure we're watching out for the brick walls so they won't slam themselves into it because all they're interested in is getting out on getting out. And they're going to hit that wall, or at least give them a helmet. Now, we're ready for questions and answers. It's 20 after, according to one of my clocks anyway, and I'm going to put my screen down. Ding. And go back to, your screen is pausing, resume share, new share. Where do I want to put this? I want to go chat. I don't want chat. I want participant stop video.
As you're looking at that, Karen, there's a question here that says, what happens if a teenage child is operating in stress mode? What is happening to the brain? Does it shut down?
The brain redirects the blood, oxygen, and energy to fight, flight, and freeze. They're going to show you one of those 3 and you have to think about their temperament. So whatever you are doing is taking your blood oxygen energy. When you're upset, you're releasing cortisol. And cortisol is our chemical that's a steroid that's supposed to protect us. But you know, when you're on steroids too long, what it can do to you. Well, that's what happens in the brain. You're on, and what happens is that cortisol prevents serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, anandamide, or our endorphins from working. So it simply acts as a blocker because it's taking all the blood oxygen energy that could be going to make serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, our own bliss chemical, and our pain management, which is endorphins. All of that stuff could be working for us, but as long as we're upset, we can't manufacture it because our blood oxygen energy is just pumping chemicals, adrenaline and cortisol into our system. And the more we pump, the more upset we get, the more we're unable to hear. And they need to watch a model back up, take charge of themselves, get extremely calm, and guide them. Now, what you do is when you have a classroom of kids that is calm enough to follow instruction, which doesn't happen often, but you can walk them through the instructions of just breathing. And what happens is so neat. At least a third of the class picks it up almost immediately and will remind you the next time, hey, we probably need to do our breathing. And the ones that are distressed are not picking it up at all to start with, but on the 5th or 6th try, they will come around, maybe sometimes up to 10 times, but they'll figure out that it's making me feel different. All they figure in the first place is that when I'm breathing differently, I'm feeling differently, and that's a threat. I'm more threatened because I feel different. And I've never felt this way before, so I do not know what's happening. Kids who've ever been calm will recognize it as a state they want to, be in. Does that make sense? Let me see. Where is I don't have my. Am I being seen?
Yep.
I can't see anybody else.
We can see you.
Okay, so what lets me see other people?
Well, other people have to put their cameras on.
Oh, they did. All right. Well, it doesn't matter. Then you can see me. I can't see me, but that's all right. I don't want to see me anyway. All right. So did that answer that question?
Yes.
You're pretty sure it did?
Yes.
Okay. But I rambled, but who knows?
So
Okay.
the next question is, how does trauma impact the pruning process?
Well, the pruning process can be interrupted by a lot of things. Trauma places all your blood oxygen energy into what I just described, and it's not going to the prefrontal cortex, where all your empty space is dedicated to learning. But you don't have blood oxygen energy in the prefrontal cortex area at all. So pruning can be affected. It's what's really affected is the new neurons that have been opened up and made available to you will not be built because blood oxygen energy is not going to them. It's going to creating more cortisol, which is then preventing all the chemistry that you learn with. That makes sense? So yeah, pruning can be affected. You can slow the pruning process down. Many kids do not prune effectively when everybody else is. They just don't have enough calmness in their life. They're not engaged in sports. They're in detention hall. They're in, you could use sports as a way of reaching these kids, because when they're expending that energy is being used to build their body, which also helps build their mind. That releases the same chemicals. Your body's built with the same basic chemicals. So, and I'm not sure I made that clear. Did that make sense to you, Julie? Oh, I have no sound.
Sorry. Yes, it made sense to me. Yep.
You did.
And so the person who asked that as well.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
So the next question is from someone who says the team they work with mainly works with adults with IDD, and they see these emotions that you've been describing quite often. Could their cognitive level be the reason they're seeing these emotions within them?
I'm not sure I understood the whole question. So you see these, their cognitive level is suffering because their emotional level. Think of the brain in the the three brains, what is they called? Survival brain, that's the brainstem area, and the midbrain and the front brain. Where your blood oxygen energy is spending its time, the other two are going to suffer. So I have to manage my body first. I have to manage my breathing. I have to manage my heart rate. I have to manage my blood pressure. I don't have to even take my blood pressure, but I can take my heart rate by putting my finger in my throat. I can measure my breathing by counting while I'm breathing. I can measure whether my hands are shaking or not. I can measure whether my stomach feels okay. Those are the things I need to have in order. Being calm, being okay, calm breathing, 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out, or longer breaths out. The longer you take breaths out, the more you'll calm yourself down. So if I'm breathing out longer than I'm breathing in, I will calm myself down. I change my chemistry that's going to build my body, chemistry that's going to build my mind. It's putting it in the prefrontal cortex. Then I'm able to think. You can talk to me, but until you've calmed my body down, you cannot talk to me because my prefrontal cortex, where I'm thinking, isn't thinking, and my emotions are not balanced because my chemistry is all on adrenaline and cortisol. That's the reason you need to really understand that whatever you're triggering in this child, they're going to show it to you until they understand they can show you something else. And they have to be taught that, just like you teach a sport in skill sets. You teach them to breathe, to measure their heart rate, and you model it. The moment that child gets upset, you start modeling the behavior. You back up and you go, I think we all need to take breaths. And I don't stop it for one child. I do the whole classroom or the whole sports field. So when anyone is showing a little bit of rage on the field, get everybody together and we all do our breathing practice and we just calm the body down. Then your emotions are going to be okay. Then you can think because the blood, oxygen, energy has been redistributed. And it's in nanoseconds. So my body responds immediately if I know how to manage it. But we're not taught that. We're not taught about managing our body first, then comes. And if we practice starting a class after the bell rings, everybody gets in the class, 3 minutes of a yoga pose and breathing, and we'll get almost 40 minutes worth of classroom attention from at least half of the kids. 40 minutes of unbroken attention by half the kids is worth it to me because I'm willing to stop at, 30 minutes and refresh everybody. So that if you keep doing that, that becomes a habit for them. And when it's a habit, they'll recognize when somebody else is not doing it and do it themselves without that prompting. But until they make a habit of it, it's not useful to them. You're going to have to remind them. And that takes patience because we get tired of reminding them. I've told you 10 times. What is wrong with you? Yeah, well, erase. All the good stuff we've just been working on. So our patience, we have to build our own patience. And watching our children use destructive behaviors is very difficult. And you have to, but for every session with a child, whether in a classroom or in a counseling session or on the field, should start with something to manage our behavior, something to manage our body, a breathing practice, a yoga practice. Well, see, yoga is nothing but breathing with a pose. Tai Chi is nothing but breathing with a movement. Martial arts is nothing but breathing with a violent movement. But, for me, I can't do yoga because I can't sit still for 20 minutes. And I can't pose for 20 minutes. I can't do Tai Chi because, I can do martial arts. Nobody wanted to teach me martial arts, but that's what saved my life, was learning to breathe and calm myself down so I can manage my behavior and then manage somebody else's. It's just keep reminding yourself when a child is showing you these behaviors, their blood, oxygen, and energy is going to making the chemistry that you don't want. So you have to change how they're acting. You have to change how they're using their body. And then you can be able to calm them down, get their emotions in order, and then they'll be able to think, they can learn.
They absolutely say that you answered the question there.
Cool.
So wonderful. There's some really great comments about your wonderful teaching style, how much people have really appreciated this. So thank you, Karen. We're all looking forward.
Thank you. Yes, and guys, I don't get this feedback. So thank you. That does make a giant difference. I don't, blither as much.
Well, we really appreciate it. There was one other question in the chat box, which was, will people be able to access the recording?
Oh, yes, that's for you to answer.
That is for me to answer. The truthful answer for everyone is hopefully what we have ran into is the sheer size of the recorded files. And so
Yeah.
finding a place where we can put those or upload those to a site because they're just impossible to email out.
You know
given-
why? That's a reason that what is it called? YouTube exists. You
Mhm.
can get assigned as an organization a YouTube channel. I don't think it's very expensive because I have one. I got it years ago, and you can publish your recordings on YouTube. And people who get that little code, they put the code in, and they can go and see all your recordings. But no one else can do it if they don't have the code. Does that make sense?
It might to my IT people, Karen.
See if it makes sense to your IT people, because the reason YouTube exists is that people didn't have any place they could put films because they have so enormous, an IT hit. They just take all your space. So yeah,
So,
try that.
wonderful. Well, we will be sharing those. We will do everything we can to
Be sure to mention the handout. If people aren't aware of the handout, there's a 2-up handout for each session. So be sure you ask Julie for those.
And I emailed those out prior to this
Oh,
session,
cool.
so I hope you received it. If you didn't, let me know and we can get that to you. Otherwise, I will say that Karen is going to be presenting the last section of this series next Thursday, same time, same place, same Zoom link.
Okay, cool deal. Well, thank you, my dears. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.